what do you think? Should we just get to it, get to the fun part? Everybody's been so patient in getting to color. Oh, and you can see in the background of the of my thing there, there's a painting with some pink trees. I just tossed that up. That's a painting I've been kind of playing with. I just bought a new tube of vibrant pink from, I can't remember the brand, but I thought I should play with that. So that was an older painting and I took it in and I kind of thought it could look like plum trees or blossoms or whatnot, kind of a springy picture. Let me go turn on the light over there so you can see it. And I got new lights, so hopefully everything will show up a little bit better. But anyways, I just threw that up there kind of in the background as a reminder of the color class and to show you kind of that we can get pretty crazy, you know, even when we start them off as just a tonal painting. So today's class, I'm going to go work on the farm scene, kind of talk my way through it as I'm working on it. And it's going to be interactive because you guys get to choose my colors. I'm going to choose one red, one yellow, and one blue, and titanium white's the only color you guys don't get to choose. So I will show you my different tubes and we can just, you guys get to pick. And so you can see that I'm not going to worry too much about chasing perfect color and that I can do a lot with just one red, one yellow, one blue, even if they're not even the perfect ones for me. If I were choosing, and I'm not trying to sway your vote, in fact, you guys can challenge me here, it would be cadmium red, medium, French ultramarine blue, and lemon yellow would be my 3 tubes if I were to choose just 3 tubes. Another option would be the French ultramarine blue, lemon yellow, and quinacridone red instead of the cad red light. But those 3 colors, either of those 2 choices can do a huge amount. And I think I mentioned in the very first class that I spent an entire year just painting with those colors. And it really taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about color mixing, but it also taught me that you can get really close and you can make colors that aren't making the exact color you want look like the exact color you want. The only problem with that color palette is you can't get bright purples and you can't get bright greens. But the truth is we rarely see those in nature. So if you are gonna paint a really bright flower or spring green, then you'd probably have to incorporate some other colors. But anyways, you can get a huge amount and you can get really dark colors with those. So I'm gonna move over to the palette setup here and ask you guys what colors. So give me 1 second. And really quickly too, I just wanted to show you how this guy is kind of coming along. I've been adding color on top of the glazing that we did because it ended up very brownish, especially in the sky. So I actually put blue into the sky, and that bright pink that I had, I decided I needed some of that in the trees, and added a little more blue back here, and then cleaned up some of the highlights. But I thought you guys might like to see that even when I go in and glaze, it doesn't mean it's finished. I can still go back in and paint on top of that. So there you go. Just thought you guys might want to see that in progress. All right, so like I said, I'm going to start with, I'm going to use titanium white for sure.
So Michael, if you used the palette that you just described, that would be 3 cools and 1 warm. Is that correct? And I know you don't tend to use that terminology, but
3 cools. What would be the cools in your opinion?
The ultramarine blue, the lemon yellow, and the white.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. But in this instance, the yellow can go either way. The lemon yellow, it's definitely cooler than like a yellow medium. but it's definitely warmer than the white.
Okay.
So yeah, it's I mean, that's something I might think about. Like if I did want a really warm scene, maybe I would choose like Indian yellow or the Hansa yellow deep instead. They're, warmer yellows. And I might just go towards the cadmium red light versus the quinacridone, because yeah, if I had the quinacridone red, the French ultramarine, and the lemon yellow, they're all considered cooler colors compared to the other colors in that hue family.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of doesn't matter because they're going to appear warm um, by just having cooler colors next to them. So that's kind of what I meant by, like, if I need an area to appear warmer, but I can't actually make a warmer color, like let's say I have an orange in my sky and I just can't make it really bright orange with the colors I have, by putting a little bit of purple or blue near that, it will make the orange feel warmer.
Okay.
So yeah, there's ways to kind of.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk a lot about that in the next class. Trying to change the angle on the camera a little bit. Is that angle okay for you guys? We've got a lot of extra space back here. So let me. There we go. That's a little better. Sorry, pink tree. Okay, let's start with the yellows. So we have our 4 options for yellow today. The cadmium yellow light, Hansa yellow deep, which would be kind of like a cadmium yellow medium or deep, but it's just the cheap version of that. Indian yellow, which is the one that I've been doing kind of the underpaintings with, the really warmish yellow, but it has a lot of options. It's very transparent, but when I add it to white, it becomes opaque quite quickly. And then this would be the toughest one, would be yellow ochre, because it already leans towards brown. It's kind of considered a dirtier yellow, earthier yellow, I guess I should say. So out of those 4, I can see you guys from where I'm standing, except for Lee. I have a hard time reading it from here. A couple others I can't quite see. But you guys want to vote by just hands up. So anybody want cadmium yellow light? I see 2. All right. Hansa yellow deep. I see 2. One reluctantly. Indian yellow. 2, 3. All right. Indian yellow so far. Yellow ochre. All right. Oh, you guys are mean. Okay. We got 3. So I'm going to choose Indian yellow and yellow ochre. Are you guys okay with that?
Yep.
A little cheating already. Yeah, that's how I like to paint. All right. Between our reds, I've got the cadmium red light and quinacridone red. I could choose, I guess I could choose the transparent earth red as well. So I'm going to start with the cadmium red light. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. The quinacridone red, which would be more like an alizarin. 1, 2. And Susan, sorry, I can't see you if you're voting. Okay, I'm sorry. With the quinacridone, was that 3 that I saw? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the earth red. 1, 2. Okay. Oh, 3. Gosh. Okay. I think that we had 4 for the quinacridone. Yep. Okay. So quinacridone it is. That's going to be a good challenge too. So yeah, it's considered a pretty cool color.
Excuse me, Michael, is this in addition to the cad red medium and the lemon yellow and the ultramarine that you already chose? Or
nope,
is it
I'm just going to choose one. Yeah.
Ah.
Kind of a weird challenge. So there are going to be some odd colors, but that's kind of what I want to show you is that I'm not so worried in this class. In the next class, color will become much more important. But in this, it's about value. We're going to be focusing on our values still, but using color. And we'll be shifting temperature. Okay, so with our blue, we have ultramarine blue. I see 3, 4, 5. Oh, everybody except for one. The other choice is manganese blue. All right, French ultramarine wins by a landslide. Okay, so this is an interesting color palette for sure, and I can't say that I've ever painted with it. It'll be interesting too because ultramarine, when I look on the back, is a transparent color. You guys all know about transparent versus opaque color. We'll talk about that again too in the next couple of weeks. But transparent colors again are like panes of glass. They can become opaque when you mix them with opaque colors, but they do go on thinner. And it kind of like in the beginning when you're first painting, you'll feel like, oh man, these are a ripoff. They don't cover the surface like the opaque colors. And there's times when I actually choose all opaque colors to paint with, and there's times I choose all transparent colors to paint with, and there's times when I mix them. My Indian yellow, so the quinacridone, also considered a transparent color. Indian yellow, considered a transparent color. My yellow ochre is a semi-transparent color, so a little cloudier, a little thicker. And then hopefully, it doesn't say on the back of titanium white, but titanium white is an opaque, meaning that it can cover. If you're ever curious, a great way to test this is take a piece of paper or cardboard and put a permanent marker, draw a couple lines on it going down your page, and then take your color thickly and make it thinner as you go across the lines, and see at what point can you see that black line underneath it. Like how thin does the paint need to be? Like with Indian yellow, I almost don't think I could make it thick enough that I couldn't see the black line underneath it. Whereas like French ultramarine, I could definitely cover it up. But very quickly, as I thinned it out by just kind of, spreading it further, you'd be able to see that line. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, great. All right, let me get these laid out. So yellow ochre. The second thing after we get this covered really kind of quickly today, I would like to go over is actually designing like we did before, but designing thinking about the negative shapes versus the positive shapes. That's something I do a lot. And again, a lot of the ways I paint, I wonder if part of it is being, having dyslexia, if I like to think of things a little bit differently, maybe a little bit backwards compared to a lot of people. But I do find that a lot of times I find the negative shapes to be some of the more interesting shapes in landscapes. I love the negative shapes in trees, and negative shape basically just means the space around the physical object that you're painting. Are these new lights making much of a difference? Can you guys see color differences here? Should be quite a lot brighter. Basically, they're two great big LED panels with temperature control, so should be fun. So I will start by mixing a couple quick piles of color that I like. And usually when I'm experimenting with new colors or even adding one new color to my palette, I'll kind of oftentimes just make up a couple different piles to see how they interact, right? So most of the time when I paint, I have titanium white, lemon yellow, some kind of a warmer yellow, I'll have cadmium yellow light, and then like Indian yellow or Hansen yellow deep. One yellow that leads towards orange anyways. And then I have cadmium red light, quinacridone red. So I've got the cad red light leans towards orange, and my quinacridone will lead towards purple. And then I have French ultramarine, which leads towards purple. So we're going to make very beautiful purples today if we wanted to make a purple farm. and manganese blue, which likes to lean towards green. For those of you who've been painting a little while and have had the joy and terror of painting with what blue is that there? With phthalo blue, know how quickly phthalo blue gets out of control and stains everything. Phthalo blue is a really, really strong color. So I actually like the manganese blue because it's a phthalo derivative. It's a much weaker, more controllable version of phthalo. But just know that if you can control phthalos, that you'll actually have more options with phthalo. I just have never learned how to control it. It always feels strange on my paintings. So anyways, the manganese blue is a good one for that. So those are my 6 colors plus white that I always use pretty much. Like without even thinking about what I'm painting, I just lay those colors out because I can make thousands and thousands of colors with those. I can make bright colors, dull colors, earthy colors, lots of beautiful grays, lots of beautiful browns. And then if I were to introduce another color, say this like crazy pink, like I used on the tree painting that I was showing you guys, brilliant pink, that would be a guest color. And I usually only introduce one guest at a time. That way I can mix it with the other colors and test it. And it just makes it a lot more approachable. When we're painting with a whole bunch of colors that we don't understand every time, it is really difficult to mix the colors you're after, and then more importantly, to remix them after you've used them. So if you have a ton of colors, I find it difficult to learn. So that's why I suggest usually starting with one of each primary, one yellow, one red, and one blue. And so we'll see. So we have big passages of kind of reds and warm yellows, and then big passages of green, and then kind of a gray blue sky. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up the yellow ochre is kind of almost a shortcut color to a lot of these ground colors. Add a little white into it.
So Michael, since last class, have you gone over, it looks like you went over it with like, earth red and ultramarine to shadow it, right?
In here? No.
In the foreground?
Probably just the better lights.
Okay.
The only thing I did was take a Q-tip in and pull out some detail areas, kind of the negative shapes, I guess, underneath the trees here, and kind of refine some shapes a little bit. But no, I really didn't do anything. Probably like 5 more minutes of taking some stuff away after class. So I didn't really touch it.
What size is your canvas?
16 inches by 20 inches. So there I've got my yellow ochre with a touch of white, and I'm going to add in some of the quinacridone red. And what you're also going to learn is some colors are just so much stronger. Like Cad Red medium or Cad Red light is a really strong color. A little bit of that goes a long ways. Most of the yellow, especially like lemon yellow and stuff, are really quite weak. I go through quite a bit of tubes of my lemon yellow. That's a really nice kind of I don't know what color, but really nice kind of pinky color. But I do want to have it darker. So I'm going to add a little more red. I'm kind of thinking the foreground grasses here. And red as a color oftentimes kind of wants to come forward in the scene as well compared to other colors. Kind of liking that. So then I can take that. It's interesting painting on an upright palette or mixing. So I'm going to darken this. I'm going to try into my French ultramarine a little bit, mixing that in. We're going to see what happens here. So evidently the French ultramarine quickly takes over. So I'll take away most of that, bring it over here to use in a little bit. And mix in a couple of the colors, and there we go. Now we have kind of a dark color. Are you guys able to see that okay over there? Maybe if I move it a little closer to the camera. And quite the glare. So oftentimes I like to do is mix up the color, and then I'll make kind of a shadow version or a cooler, darker version. If the shadows are cooler, which they are going to be in this painting today, and a lighter version. The reason I like to mix my colors with a palette knife is, and I think I've talked about this before, is it's just much easier to clean than a brush. You're often, bringing in colors that you're not intending to with a brush because it's just never quite as clean as you think. Whereas with a palette knife, it's just a quick wiping down and it's clean. Except for this one has acrylic paint stuck on it because my daughter's been using it. Maybe I'll get a clean knife so I can tell. Cleaner. Okay, so that's kind of going to cover my foreground area. Now I'm going to look back into my mid area, quite a bit yellower. Quite a bit lighter and cooler than the red. Yeah, and yellow ochre is a color that is very, very rarely on my palette, but it's a really great shortcut color, especially when you're working with fall colors and browns and whatnot. So it's working out pretty nicely for this painting. I'm going to bring in just a touch of the blue. So that blue is dominating. It's changing things really quickly. So that made it a lot cooler, a lot faster. So I'm going to pull some of that aside to make into my darker color. I'm going to add a little more yellow to warm that back up and lighten it back up. I'm also going to bring in a little of the Indian yellow to warm it. There we go. Bring in some vibrancy into it. If you are new to using Indian yellow, I definitely suggest you pull some aside and just experiment with what it does. It does not mix like a normal yellow. It has strange properties, but it does make, let me grab some clean white here, beautiful and vibrant yellows. So really bright. You guys can see that, I'm guessing. So it does neat things when it becomes opaque, and it makes beautiful peach colors with the quinacridone red. So I really like Indian yellow. And again, my favorite color in painting is peach. Don't know why. I don't even really like to eat peaches that much. But I just find these color ranges really pleasant to me. So you guys are all going to find your favorite colors. My favorite colors to wear are blue and green, but I don't actually like to paint blue and green things that much. I'll often change them towards the warmer side. So you just kind of learn that as you paint, or maybe you can just walk around your house and find your, what colors you gravitate towards by how you decorate it and different things like that. So anyways, if you do decide to use Indian yellow into your painting, not just as your underpainting color, please play with it, experiment. It makes, look at that really bright, warm color though. I'm going to pull that aside and use that as put it right up here in between. I'm also going to do a little French ultramarine and Indian yellow just to see what happens with that. So I got my French ultramarine, some Indian yellow, and it's a pretty ghastly dark green because the French ultramarine is completely dominating that Indian yellow. So I'm going to add more Indian yellow down here so we can see as it changes. Yeah, really interesting colors. Hopefully you guys can kind of see that. It'll be a little easier if I add some white to it to see the colors. And we'll be doing some color charts and things like that, experimenting, playing with our colors. Isn't that beautiful though, these transitions? So we've got very interesting colors here and how they're gonna combine and how they're gonna play together. I very much, and I know I've said it a couple times already, suggest that you do what I'm doing before you start your painting. Just see what colors you can make. It'll help avoid frustration. But it's also just seeing what kind of harmonies can you make. This color could be really beautiful into the light sides of the trees. I'll add a little more red to that. When painting greens, look for reds. That is a great hint. Greens are often have a lot more red, especially in Oregon, than we think they do. When we think green, we just think blue and yellow mixed. But I want you to experiment with adding green or reds into your greens. And that's a great way to get them to go towards the more olivey kind of green that we actually see here in Oregon. It's going to be a little bit interesting if I tried to make a really pure green. I don't think I can with this palette. I would need kind of that Indian yellow. So I'm just going to have to experiment. If I did want, if any of you are looking for a bright pure green, it's going to be tough with this palette. So I just know that, and I know that I'm going to have much more olivey, in my opinion, complicated and beautiful greens than if I were using manganese blue and yellow lemon yellow. If you mix those two, you can make a very vibrant green, but I just can't. I can't make a really vibrant green right now. I'm going to try taking my Indian yellow, adding white to it, and making a bright yellow. And then adding French ultramarine. And let's see if what that does. Okay, so I have that. But remember, the French ultramarine leans towards purple compared to the manganese. And again, we're going to go over all this. I know this is complicated and lots of stuff if you haven't dealt with color much. But because it leans towards purple, it inevitably has red in it. The French ultramarine does. So it just does not want to make pure green, because the way we neutralize a bright green is by mixing from across the color wheel, which is red, and that neutralizes it, meaning it takes it towards brown. So anyways, here's my French ultramarine added to that bright Indian yellow mix. And it's just not making a bright green. It's just not making a vibrant green, but it is making a beautiful gray green, which is on the cooler side, I kind of feel. And so anyways, that is my note to myself. Don't get sad when I can't mix bright greens, because my students are mean and picked hard colors to paint with. So it's your fault, not mine. Just kidding. But it's great for me to know that, kind of to know my range. Like if whatever colors you pick, maybe I would say, what's the brightest orange I could make? What's the brightest purple I could make? You know, my secondary colors. What's the brightest green, like we're trying to do here, that I can make? Okay, that's as bright as it gets. That's as vibrant as it's going to be. Now I just deal with it. And that's fine. Again, we're looking for values more than colors. And I'm actually really loving these colors. There's already an innate harmony. Sorry about that glare. Maybe I need to change this camera or light angle a little bit. That's better, isn't it? to see the colors. And I can probably zoom in a little bit too. There we go. Just think by the third class how technologically savvy I'll be finally. There we go. So now you can see the colors. Even though they're odd, like there's not a bright green in here, there's not a bright orange in here, they're beautiful. I just love this harmony over here. This one's got some potential. If I get rid of the middle color, I love these three colors together. So I'm oftentimes just looking for a nice harmony, a nice feel. I don't hold too tightly to mimicking color exactly in the photo. Again, the photo is usually a bad version of real life already. So trying to mimic a photo, and you guys have seen it too, where you take 3 or 4 pictures of the same setting and each photo has very different colors just by slightly aiming at or focusing into a different area. So I want you to realize that you have control of the colors you're putting in, right? We were learning about editing and how we can change our scene to be more, what we want to convey. And now we're going to start doing that with color as well. So kind of what mood do I want? Is it somber? Is it bright and exciting? This is going to be a little bit more, I don't want to say a little bit somber, a little bit more kind of old fashioned feeling, I'm kind of guessing. These colors remind me kind of 1950s, especially this pink in here. I love mixing kind of a gray green, so we'll see some of that. And anyways, let's mix up some sky color here. I'm going to clean up my palette a little bit. It's the great thing about glass is I can just take my paint, make them into piles so they're not taking up so much space. And for those of you who want to paint a little more impressionistically, meaning you want thicker, juicier paint dabs or strokes, by putting your paint into piles versus just pushing it around the glass palette, allows your brush to have paint on it, to actually load it up. So I mix some sky color into here, and I may have to move my reference just so I have more mixing space. So hopefully that's okay. If I run out of mixing space, I may have to move that. But you guys all have that reference, so you can refer to it. All right, so my sky, I know that it's light, so I've added white, and I can go about this in any order of events. I know that it leans towards blue, so I'll mix some blue in there, but it's not, again, this blue wants to go towards purple. So it's kind of a purplier blue. It's showing a little green on your guys' screen, I think. So I'm going to mix just a touch of quinacridone red, taking it towards purple, but I'm actually going to jump over and add some yellow. And by adding all 3 colors, yellow, blue, and red, I'm going to start graying my color down or browning it down, but I want to be careful that I don't go towards brown. Which yellow should I use? That is a tough question. Because I'm using a lot of the yellow ochre, I'm going to try that one. It's just a little bit in there, just to hopefully sneak up on the color. It's pretty nice. It's a little bit on the dirtier side, so some of you may want a much more vibrant sky. Add a little more white just so that there's a bigger contrast in the between. It's basically a very cool gray is what I've got going right now. And why I want kind of a cooler blue is, if we remember in the reference that I'm going to use, it has these nice warm cloud patches. To make these feel warmer, they're going to go much better with a cooler blue than like if I put a warm blue in there. They just wouldn't be quite as special. So I'm going to go with a kind of a cool gray blue. And just because I pre-mix these doesn't mean I'm stuck to them. I can always change my mind once I start painting. In fact, I often will. But this kind of gives me so now I'm going to mix some of the pinks that are in some of the clouds, pinks and purples. So I'm going to start with a little bit of the quinacridone, just a touch of my French ultramarine. It's going to make a really dark plum color.
Excuse
Can
me,
you move
can
your
you
camera up?
move the camera up? We can't see the palette.
Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. So what I had done was a little bit of French ultramarine into a little bit of a pile of quinacridone. It's very dark purple. I'm going to add white to that, quite a bit, in fact. And it should make a very nice fuchsia. Quinacridone is a fantastic color. For those of you who are still using alizarin is great, beautiful, beautiful color. But I find that I can make my quinacridone, which is a much more modern color, I can make it do everything alizarin can do, but I cannot make alizarin do half of what quinacridone can do. So that's why I chose that color. There's a lot of times where I'll have, I've had duplicate or a lot of colors on my palette that I've gone through in deciding which are my always colors. And I try to use ones that I can do the most with, not in this instance. When we get to color theory class, that's what we'll show you, those 2 reds, 2 yellows, and 2 blues. And so I got rid of alizarin because, again, quinacridone could do everything alizarin can do. So this is a beautiful, beautiful fuchsia color, but it's not anything that I have on I'm going to need in my painting. So I'm going to actually warm it up. I'm going to add a little more quinacridone, and I'm going to actually grab a touch of Indian yellow because I actually want to warm it up. And we'll see, because I have that little bit of French ultramarine in there, I run the risk of it not ever getting very bright and very warm. So let's see, I added quite a bit of white. If I had a great big mixing space right now, I would actually be mixing it down so you could see the transition in colors from where I was to where I am now. Much nicer, much warmer. I'm going to add some white to that, lighten it up, touch more Indian yellow into that, warming it up. Can you guys see the comparison between the pink and the yellow right next to each other? Good. I never can know how well it's showing up on your monitors or whatever you're looking at this through. I'm going to even lighten it one more time and warm it up one more time so that these clouds can really be being hit by sunlight. A little more white into that. I am definitely contaminating my white. I should be wiping my palette down each time I go, or palette knife down each time I go to dip into that color. Now I'm going to want a cooler side on the clouds, also kind of a purpler. I don't want to make this nearly as dark as I am going to be putting into my trees, right? Even though it looks really dark in the clouds, kind of the dark blue gray area, I don't want that anywhere near as dark as I'm going to have in my shadows in the trees. Okay, so just knowing that, I'm going to add a little French ultramarine, a little more quinacridone, and touch of the yellow ochre. A little more quinacridone because it's not as purple as I want. And it's so dark, right? I mean, that's almost the darkest color on my palette now. Sorry if I cut you off there. So I know I need to definitely lighten that up. Whenever we are lightening a color, we're going to call that a tint. That's not my word, that's everybody's word. Whenever you're lightening with white, it's called tinting or tint. Whenever you're darkening, it's called a shade. Okay, so we'll be learning those words as we go along. And a lot of times when you hear me saying that, I try to remember to say it both ways. Tint, adding white. shade, adding black or adding a darker color to it. Okay, much lighter. I'm gonna go ahead and mix some of this pink into it so we have a transition to see how they play together. And there I've kind of got my cloud transition from a bluey, purpley gray down to more of a pinky, a peach color. Like I said, I'm gonna sneak peaches in whenever I can, a little bit warm towards the yellow and then towards a brighter, creamier yellow here. So that's kind of my sky colors, kind of my field colors. Trees, I still need my shadow darks. I'll oftentimes mix all three colors like I just did there. I've got blue, red, and yellow. Again, that gives a harmony across everything. It's just that I know that I want to lead towards a dark, dark green. So it's much more blue and much more yellow. Look how dark that is. Crazy, right? I mean, that is almost a chromatic black. You can add a little white to see which way it's leaning. I do want to be careful when I'm adding white though, because what happens when you add white, it cools down, right? So if I'm wanting warmer shadows, maybe underneath the bottoms of the trees and stuff, I probably don't want to be adding yellow. I could probably add a little yellow ochre, which will still lighten it up, but keep it a little bit warmer. There we go, beautiful. Very lovely. These colors really stand out though compared to these others. There's not a whole lot of harmony going on. So I could kind of decide, do I want my shadows to also be in harmony, or am I going to use those shadows as my structure and not worry as much about it because I'm going to be building these colors on top of those. We shall kind of play that one by ear a little bit as we go along. We'll see if it's too glaring and too obvious of a difference between the areas being hit by light on the trees and stuff versus the shadows. I want them to relate. I want it to feel like it's still the same tree. It's just being hit by light or being hit by shadow or being in shadow. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out so we can see the painting. Move the camera slightly. It's interesting having a tripod right at my feet. And I'm going to probably change that light. It's still pretty glary here. Any questions so far, you guys? Does that make sense? Does anybody here ever pre-mix colors?
Yes, I do every single time.
Look at you, smart you.
I do it and I hate it.
Right? But it's so fun. I get lost doing it though, where I just, oh, that's such a beautiful color. And all of a sudden I'm looking around the studio. What painting can I put this on? It's so pretty. Or I'll be mixing colors, find such a beautiful color that I'll pull it aside for some other project and like put it somewhere. Yeah, it is. It's a tough thing, especially when you're like out plein air painting and you want to just get rolling. You want to, you're chasing the light, you're chasing the scene. But the truth is, just like all of this that I've been teaching you guys, the little studies, the value study, everything else, it doesn't need to be every time, but I want it to be a part of your thought process. I want you to be thinking about it. A lot of professional artists have done these things that I've been teaching you for years and years and years. So now they can skip some of them. But in the beginning, I really suggest you take this little bit extra time in the beginning because it will save you time in the long run. And it'll save you heartache. And, now I'm looking at this and I can say, you know what? These colors perfectly match my bathroom. I can't wait to hang this painting in there. It's going to go great with my fluffy toilet seat covers and stuff. And anyways, I suggest it strongly. Okay, normally, can zoom out a little bit more. All right, that's showing everything pretty well, isn't it? Yeah, perfect. Wow, great. Except for that big glare. So we'll deal with that here in a little bit. Where do you guys think I should start? In the sky, in the trees, in the grasses? The truth is there's not really a wrong answer. But what I typically do is work kind of from dark to light, big to small, thin to thick. That's my general way of approaching my paintings. It makes kind of the build-up process of it the most successful, the most often. Again, it's just kind of guidelines. It's helpful when I can do it that way. It's not always the case. There's a lot of times where I would just start with the sky. And there's reasons to do that as well. I can start with the sky just because the sky color dictates, it is the light source, right? So it dictates all other colors in there. Everything that's not in shadows is being affected by the light source. And in fact, a lot of the colors in the shadows are inevitably being affected by the light source as well. So we can start with the sky and make a great argument for that. And maybe that's kind of what I'll do. I would just leave a little bit of space around my trees so that I can kind of bring them together towards the end a little bit. I can
Michael, can you repeat those three principles again, from dark to light, thick to thin?
Yeah, but it's thin to thick. And what that means, and it means a couple different things when you're painting, but what it means for us is I've made a thin painting here. It's, you know, the paint is not thick on there. So I can apply more paint very readily, very easily. You want your paint to get thicker and thicker as you build up. It's very difficult if you start off like Monet and paint really thick. If you want to continue to paint throughout the day, it's difficult to layer that paint onto itself. So if you start with thinner paint and then paint with thicker, you know, adding more to it, that's one thing. Another thing that it means is if you want to use a little bit of Gamsol or paint thinner in the beginning, it's right in the name, paint thinner. We can do that. And then as you build up, you would go to thicker paint, or you would add medium or oil to your mix. And that's also, then they call it lean to fat. So fat being the oils and the medium. And that's another way to build up your painting. And especially if you're painting on canvas, this can become very important, because what happens is the thinner layers will dry faster. And you want it to dry from the surface up towards us. You don't want to put a thin layer on top of wet, thick paint, because it will dry, encapsulating this still drying thick paint, and that can lead to cracking and an unsound surface. Does that make sense, everybody?
Quick question.
Sure.
It's Mary. How often do you consider the horizon when you're thinking big picture?
Every painting. Yeah, always I'm considering the horizon. I know that this one's going up a hill and back down a hill, back on that back side. And even how I've painted it, it's even a little more than that. This one also has, so there's kind of a hill, and then the road goes down, then the road goes back up, then the road goes back down, then it starts going up a hill, kind of levels out, and then it goes up a hill again, kind of levels out, and then it goes down a hill. Who knows what's happening way back here? And then there's a hill. So there's a lot of undulation of our space. So truly our horizon line's probably back here, like, you know, below this line, because we're looking up a hill slightly. And what do you mean by how often do I consider the horizon line?
The reason I asked is I sometimes see an interchange between the sky and the reflection on the ground. And I was just wondering where you started to think about that.
That's a good question. Yeah, and that's one of my favorite parts to paint, is that transition from where the atmosphere sits right on the ground. And you'll often see in my paintings, it gets warmer right as it gets towards the ground. It'll either go towards reds or oranges, just because I like to overemphasize the amount of dirt or exhaust or whatever else is in the atmosphere low. And then it gets cleaner as it goes up, oftentimes in my paintings. It also has to do with the bending of the dome of the sky. We can talk about that more in the next class as well. But yeah, that's a good question. I guess I think about it, but like if I had a mountain, I still might add that effect in, even at the top of a mountain, possibly. You know, if it was up in the Alps and really up high, maybe it's just going to be pure sky at that point, right below, behind the mountain. But yeah. So I need to do one quick change because I can't actually get to the painting because of where the camera is. So I'm going to move the camera angle slightly. I apologize for that, but I'll try to make it work as best I can. Now I need to move this back, but now I can reach to it. And I am going to go ahead and remove the reference. Are you guys okay with that? If you need it, you guys have it, hopefully. I'm just going to put it down flat so I can still see it. But I want to have more mixing area here because I can tell that was getting a little squished, and I like to have a great big mixing area. Okay, so who thinks I should start with the sky? Raise your hand. 3, 4, 5, 6. How many of us are there? All right, who thinks I should start with the shadows? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, we're starting. Oh, 6. Are you guys voting twice? All right, one more time. Should I start with the shadows first? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and the sky first. And there's a number of you I can't see. Darla, I can't see. Lisa, I can't see. All right, we're starting with the shadows, which is, again, more the typical way I would do it. I could bring in some of the light of the sky. In fact, what I can do, kind of a hybrid, is I'm going to bring in some of the lightest colors that I'm going to use are in the lights in the sky, kind of where the clouds are being hit. Probably a little lighter than that. And what that does is that gives me kind of a reference point for, I don't want my grasses probably getting much lighter or even probably too close to that lightness that I have there. That's going to kind of be my lightness. I'm not going to have anything going straight to white except for maybe, you know, the roof of the silos is probably the brightest thing in there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and grab a little bit of paint thinner. When I'm painting my shadows, I will generally keep it kind of thinner, painting thin to thick, dark to light, big to small. So I'm thinking my big shapes. So I'm going to get in here and get some nice, interesting shadow shapes. Big difference getting in there, darkening. It's going to be shiny. So and what we'll do is we'll get our shadows kind of placed in here. And then we'll take a little 5-minute break so you guys can get up, stretch your legs. Maybe grab the reference if you want it, even though all of our paintings are so different now. Awesome. Again, I kind of think of my shadows, my darks, as giving me my structure that I'm going to build up the lights on top of. The lights are definitely a lot more fun. You get a lot more color in them. And so we definitely, I can see people wanting to jump towards them, including myself, because I always want to, you know, skip the kind of more boring side of things. But what I have to remember is if I'm building a house, I don't go out and start putting up the curtains first before I've even put in my foundation. Okay. Just won't work. So I need to get my shadows in. These are really quite dark. They may be too dark because I want these to be my darkest shadows all the way over here. And a lot of times when I get lost in a painting, it's just a matter of me coming back and reinforcing my shadows again, because that gives me my form and my structure and kind of reminds me of how I want to build it up. So if you're ever got like really getting lost, or your painting's just really getting wishy-washy and floaty and nonsensical, by simply coming back in and reinforcing, building back up my shadow areas, I can kind of remind myself of the important elements. I'm gonna add a little bit of red to my really dark color now, because I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna make these shadow areas over here in the big tree, foreground tree. And by warming up my shadows, just like everything else, when you warm it up, it wants to come forward compared to that. So these shadows are going to be a little bit more greener. These ones are going to be a little bit more red, green. And then these ones back here are going to be a little bit more blue. And that's going to help me give myself perspective in my shadows. They're also going to get lighter. They're going to start dark up front, get a little bit lighter, and then quite a bit lighter back here. And that's going to help me get my sense of perspective. I have had, over the many, many years of teaching now, so many people argue with me that shadows get darker as they go back into space. And it's such an interesting thing that, these are grown people who've driven down many, many roads and looked off to the mountains many, many times and seen the effects of atmosphere and everything else. But it's so strange that people will still be like, no, shadows get darker as they go back, and they'll put them into their paintings like that. And it's a really amazing aha moment when I'm able to show them, no, in fact, shadows, the darks, get lighter and generally cooler as they recede into space due to the levels of atmosphere between us and back there, the distance, the wavelengths of color. Different colors have different wavelengths, and so you see them at different distances. Lots of different fun things happen with color in space, in perspective. It's probably going to be hard to see much of a differentiation between these shadows and these shadows, both darkness and temperature wise, just on the monitor, but it'll be obvious when we get back here.
The differences are definitely showing up on my screen.
Oh, good. Yeah, and I'm overplaying them, but you know what? That's one of the things in my paintings that I often overplay, is my feeling of atmosphere, again, in the shadows, in the darks. I sometimes joke that people like to buy my paintings because of the amount of real estate they get in them. If you have a very tight painting where everything feels very close up and doesn't have that room to move around in, you're just not getting the acreage. Who doesn't want a house with a view, right? Who doesn't want a house where you can see further away and see the sunset and different things? So I actually do think about that a little bit. Sometimes it's really nice to have a nice intimate scene, but I do sometimes see a correlation between the amount of space presented in my paintings and the desirability. And I'm going to be able to go over these darks with my lights and my mids. So, I'm worried about the shapes, but I'm not so specific, knowing that I'm going to be able to come back in and carve away some of these shapes using my lights and mid colors. How my light is, there's really not a whole lot of shadow on this road because it's not like the grasses are super tall. And the light's hitting this side of the little berms. Add a little bit of a dark back on this side just for myself, but I probably won't emphasize it much. So that's where it's important for me to kind of observe my reference and say, am I painting what I think I know, or I'm painting what I see? And again, I can make things up a little bit. I'm going to lighten this down a little as I get back here. All right, so now I'm going to add some white to these shadows and see where that goes. Grab my palette knife. Add a little blue. And it's up to me how far back, what's the transition I want to make between these darks and these darks back here. And I'm just going to go a little bit crazy, and meaning quite light. And we'll just see if I can get away with it. A little bit of paint thinner. I also will oftentimes add a little bit of paint thinner into my shadow areas, just because when it dries, it'll dry a little bit more matte. And it makes it easier to photograph. If your shadows have a lot of oil in them, they're the darks get very shiny and hard to photograph. So a little note for you, some of those of you. I'm going to put it up close to here. And I'm going to say that that's too light, probably. And add a little bit of let's see now. So if I put this right next to this dark, just to show you, can you guys see that little mark? It's quite a lot lighter. If I put it over here next to this one, quite a lot lighter. So we'll see if it's too light. It's kind of too vibrant. I think I need it to get a little duller. It's kind of a very lively blue. So I'm going to add a little bit of orange to that, or just both yellow and red. See where that takes me. There we go. Can let it get a little bluer than that though.
Michael, this is Shelley. I don't know if it's just my computer screen, but the view of all the gallery on the right-hand side is covering your trees. Is there any way you could move your camera a little bit? Oh, that works. Or your easel. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, always let me know that, because yeah, I can't quite see what you guys are seeing. Right now I'm on gallery view, so I'm seeing only myself as a little tiny square. I didn't pin it before I got up. Another thing I want you guys to think about when you're painting the trees and whatnot is your contrast between your lights. Let's say the light in this big tree form, the lights, and the darks is going to be a much higher contrast, meaning the lights are going to be further away from the darks than they are when you get towards the background, where the lights and the shadows get closer to each other in value.
Michael,
Yes.
would you mind reminding us what your mixture was for the dark warms of the front trees?
Yeah, so it's French ultramarine in quinacridone red primarily. I tried putting the yellow ochre, but then it lightened up the color because there's quite a bit of light, an opaque color in there. So I did Indian yellow instead. And that made a very, very dark, but very transparent color. So I'll be curious, but you know, sometimes having a transparent shadows is really nice. So I may have to add some paint into those shadows as we, you know, move along. But right now it's giving me my, again, I hate to keep saying it, but our roadmap, our building blocks. And I mean, that's kind of how I paint, is I just keep building up the building blocks, and eventually kind of an image just appears. You just kind of keep going and going. There you go. Can you guys can see that pretty well? I would hope the changing of the darks over. I'm going to brush some of this out because it's so shiny. If I take it down like this, up and down, a lot of times that will take away some of the shine and allow me to be able to see it a little better. The same over here. Is that helping take away some of the glare and the shine in the shadows? Yes. Or is it not making any difference?
Yes.
It's helping.
Great. All right, gang. I say we take a break for 5. I need to move my feet. They're going numb. I need to get on different shoes if I'm going to stand in one place like this. And I'll grab a glass of water, grab you guys some tea. And yeah, hopefully that all made sense. And yeah, anyways, 5 minutes. See you guys at 10:50, 10:51. Susan, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
So I just changed on my monitor so that it's showing the painting on the right side of the palette. Is that showing that way to you?
No. The palette is on the left.
The palette is on the left. The color mixing is on the left and the painting is on the right side?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I just wanted to be able to see it the same way as you. I had it in reverse and it was confusing when I was
Oh.
trying to move it. And are you seeing numbers at the bottom of the screen?
Yes.
Okay, I do not know how to get rid of those still.
Oh, yeah. Well, we don't even see them anymore. I don't think.
Okay, great. And I'm just trying, I still notice a bit of glare on the trees on the left side. So, and definitely on the palette. I'm going to try to,
That's your new lights?
yeah. You're supposed to put them almost sideways to the scene, but I'm
Oh.
afraid if I do that, then they'll be, you'll see them. So
Yeah.
let me play with that a little bit more and see if I can get rid of some of that glare. Without blinding us, without putting the light. Maybe that glare is from the window.
Well, that just improved it a little bit,
Okay.
but not entirely on the left.
I'm just going to shut the curtains on the windows and see if that does much.
Lorianne Kostusiak, I think her name is having trouble getting in. She asked if somebody could give her an invite.
Shouldn't need an invite. Who is that?
It says, let me see. It's, hi everyone, not sure why, but I'm having trouble joining our class. Could someone send me an invite, please? It's Lorianne Kostusiak. And then I think Kim Bonnie sent her an invite, but I don't know if she got in.
And where are you seeing that?
And my Facebook.
Oh, okay.
I saw a Facebook announcement, so I went to see what they wanted. It's in the value of design.
Okay, I sent it in an email and it should be the same as we've been using every time.
Kim sent her the invite. Did she make it in? Lorianne Kostusiak.
Gallery view. Lorianne is here. Yep. Lorianne, can you hear me? Are you in the class? Just need to touch your space bar.
Yes, I am.
Okay, great.
Sorry, thanks.
So were you in and then you got booted out for a second?
No, I had a hard time getting into Zoom today for some reason.
Okay.
So, no,
Yeah.
I've been here most of the time.
Okay, and the next class will be the same link as this as well. In the beginning of the class, I was able to set it up so it's the same every time.
Okay.
I'm going to try one more time to get rid of that glare on the palette. I'm guessing still, it might be the window, it might be the light. Maybe I'll just turn off that light over there. So give me one more second, changing it back to speaker view, and I've got myself pinned. So we'll see. All right, if I turn this light off.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Much better.
That does it.
Yep.
Now
But can
turn
you
this
see now?
on and just change. Oh boy. Yeah, because if I put it aside like they recommend, then oh, it doesn't show up still.
That's pretty good. That's good.
Yeah, and let me turn it down. The brightness down. This color here on the far left is reading as it's actually quite orange in truth. See that?
Yeah.
So Turning it down further. Maybe turn the temperature up.
There it is.
Man, these lights are great. When I learn how to use them. Just like,
What kind are they?
you want to see them? Okay, I'll try not to blind you, but they're huge, and they're just these great big controllable panels of LED lights. There's 60 LED lights on each panel. I have 2 of them, and then they have controls on the back. My daughter makes videos for online, like just for fun, music kind of stuff. And so she's excited because they do these crazy things. Let's see if I can, like lightning, police cars.
Jeez.
Now that's candlelight. So that's actually, I guess I can almost even do that, but it's very yellow. It's not too bad actually with the other colors. Huh. That's interesting. It kind of has that little flicker of candle lights, and then it goes all the way through like party lights and what's that? Oh, bulb flashes. So yeah, that's the paparazzi there. So weird. Party lights that make it really hard to read my colors. There's the paparazzi again. All right, let's get out of here, get back to, it's interesting that candle actually makes the colors read the truest. And I'm guessing it's that warm light contrasting against the cool light that I have on the other one. Police car. Sorry, just getting back through them. Hopefully nobody has a seizure here. I'm gonna warm this up again. Oh, that's TV, not what I wanted. All right, there we're getting pretty close. Huh. All right, well, I am learning. I'm looking forward to using these also to photograph my artwork, because that's always been a huge struggle for me. And getting, professional photos can be $50 to $75 per painting. And that can eat into your profit, especially when you're photographing paintings that don't actually sell. So yeah, we're looking pretty good.
Michael, this is Carol. That is so much better. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll figure it out, Carol. Thank you for sticking with me. These little commercial breaks are good for this kind of stuff here. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's fantastic. All right, we're just going to redo all the other classes. Sorry. Now that we can actually see the paintings. All right, I am going to get started in 1 more minute. I need to grab my water. Get a sip of water. But isn't that fun? I mean, even just looking at the picture now, it feels so much more complete just by having that sense of depth. These shadows in here, I'm actually going to knock back some of the darkest ones. They're a little too dark. I could just come back in and lighten them, and I probably will once we're building up the painting. But it really has this kind of nice sense of depth already. Yeah, I think I made these shadows a little too dark, but we'll work with that. All right, so now my next thing is still going from dark to light. Believe it or not, the darks or the light sides of the trees, those greens in there, are actually still some of my darkest darks. A lot of times when we put the light like onto trees, like onto dark things that aren't reflective, we make them too light because we just compare them, their darkness to the lightness right beside each other versus comparing the lightness of the trees. So I'm thinking kind of like up here where you have the tops of the trees are much lighter than the shadows of the trees. But look how much darker they are than the sky. That's where seeing color as value, value as color becomes especially tricky. And if I want this to continue to read correctly in space, I need to keep those values pretty close to what's on here, even if I'm not matching the colors. Okay. And you guys can kind of see in the background too here. See how much closer the lights are to the shadow color. If you squint your eyes at what I'm showing you back here, the lights basically disappear. But up here, when you squint your eyes, they're still evident. So that's what I was talking about. The values get closer as things recede back into space. That's why when you have hills in the far background, you don't see like all the trees and everything. You don't see the light hitting all the trees because the values get so much closer together. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start bringing in, cleaning my brush a little bit here. I'll actually change brushes to a little bit more detail. And I am going to move this over a little more. The funny thing is now that I've got the glare fixed for you guys, I'm seeing so much glare in here because of the light to my right. Let me see if I can, one more little tweak. Hopefully it doesn't affect you guys. Nope. Those lights have little shields on them so I can actually block the light so it's not in the corner of my vision as much. All right, so I'm gonna bring in some of the lights on top of these trees, and I'm gonna work my way back just like I did here. And I've got this one big green color here, but I don't want all the trees to have the same, you know, I want it to be a little more interesting. And in fact, these don't even need to be green trees if I didn't want to. If I wanted to make them, you know, more towards the browns, more towards the reds, I totally can. And I am going to go ahead and make these trees go towards the red a little bit, a red green. So I'm going to bring that down. Nice. Now I got some mixing area. I'm going to add a little bit more quinacridone. Whew. Went flying by it, didn't I? That is too red, too brown. There, I just went crazy and went too much blue. So happens sometimes where I just get too excited and I go bouncing back and forth. But I'm going to need a lot of green anyways, so I'm just going to make a pretty good sized pile down here. That was my, seems like every color I add, it just goes really far that direction, but I'm starting to like it. Adding red. Adding a little more yellow. I'm going to add just a touch of white, just a touch. And a little bit of my Indian yellow, just because I don't want that white to make it too cool. I'm pretending I've got a nice warm light source, and I'm using the colors that I see in my clouds back there. Remember, they're quite warm compared to the cool of the sky, so I know my light source is pretty warm. And again, I need those clouds to be in the same world as these trees. Lighten that up just a touch. So now I just kind of, I'm going to test it and see what happens. And I've got this nice area right in the middle where this littler tree is picking up some of the light. So it's a great area to kind of test. Oh yeah. Great. I can just kind of fill in that area and give it my big shape if I want. Get some of these red or greens down here. I'm going to bring those onto these trees. I want to make sure that my trees have a little bit of personality. And I also don't want my trees to be too busy, too broken up. So I will kind of bind some of those lights and stuff as well where I can, meaning make them meet up with each other. So that it's not just spots of light against the shadow. I'm gonna go ahead and make this tree over here a little bit on the lighter side, a little bit yellower. And make it bind down to here. So just kind of getting some big shapes. So you're beginning to see the light side, the shadow side. I don't have a mid, it's just 2 values as of right now, right? But that's okay, because I'll get my mids, my mid values. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little more red. A red or green. Up towards the top, where it's kind of meeting up with the sky. Can also add a little bit of warmth to contrast against those shadows back there. The cool blues against the reds will be nice. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of a lighter, some light hitting some of these. Right now I'm just using a flat brush, so it's got a very squared off tip, and I'm just kind of giving, it's almost like a pixelated or geometric shapes I'm getting. I'll come in and break those up so that it doesn't look like a old 1980s computer scene. But again, right now I'm just kind of building blocks, right? I'm going to create a mid-tone. So now watch what happens is I'm going to add a mid where the lights and the darks are meeting in a lot of places, and that'll create kind of a, you know, the areas that's not in the full light and not in full shadow.
Michael, when you put your hand across to do the painting, the camera goes out of focus.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's because I have it in zoom. So I'll try to, I think it's trying to zoom in on my, or focus on my shoulder a little bit. So I will try to, having to kind of reach across. So depending on how I want to work, I like to oftentimes work the whole surface. really quickly. So if I wanted to, you know, I could literally just kind of finish off these trees and, you know, get in here and really start giving them detail with, you know, using littler brush marks and blending in so the transitions are more mellow. But I'm actually going to go ahead and jump across and add the colors to the other trees as well, so that I can see if they are reading well, the lights and the darks, because now we're not only having okay, so now I'm going to go to this tree area. And the truth is I can almost keep the same colors and values in the lights as I had, but I'm going to lighten them up, or, you know, make them go back just a little bit by cooling them down. But not much. It's not a huge jump. The thing I like about flats too, the flat brushes, is I can kind of turn them and get these nice little shapes, and there's a lot of mark making I can make with flats. Not just the geometric, you know, square shapes, angular. For some of you, you're going to find it a lot easier to use the filberts. They kind of lend themselves to more organic brush strokes, kind of more organic feeling. So whichever brushes you feel like. And there's times too when I do these trees that I'll just use the big shop brushes, because they definitely want to lean, you know, want to make very organic brush marks.
Michael, since you're talking about brushes, do you have a brand that you prefer?
I mean, if I can afford them, Rosemary's the best, in my opinion. I look for hog hair when I'm buying flats, and I like my flats long, like as long a bristle as I can get. Generally, not as long as I can get, because they get really extreme. But like, here's a really long. This isn't a flat, but I really do enjoy painting with these really long ones, but they're difficult to control in the beginning. Rosemary brushes you have to order from England. I'm enjoying these. This is a gray matter brush. I'm enjoying those, but what I would look for is interlocking bristles, hog hair interlocking bristles. And that just means that the bristles turn in towards each other. Even though this brush is really old and abused, it's really kept its form. It started as a flat and now it's a filbert. And as I'm wearing it down, the bristles aren't just, they don't splay out like a lot of cheap brushes want to just kind of explode out. I say that they look like those gnomes that used to be on the top of pencils, and you spin them and their hair would explode out. So I just want my brushes to keep.
That's trolls, Michael.
Trolls.
Gnomes. They're different.
Yes, thank you so much. I was racking my brain. But yeah, and then most of my brushes are firm hog hair bristles, but I do have some synthetic and synthetic blends that are much softer. That would be a great brush for coming in here and taking and you know, just kind of feathering out and adding, you know, really nice brush.
Michael,
Go ahead.
I think you recommended the Robert Simmons Signet brushes.
I do love those. Yeah.
Yeah, because I got some of those. I like them too.
Yeah, I very much like those. I don't have too many for whatever reason. The brush that I used to get all the time was this Utrecht, which is now Blick, and it's a number 209. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's but they, since Blick bought Utrecht, I have found them to be inconsistent. But I still will buy those. They're very inexpensive, especially when Blick is having their, you know, buy one, get one for a penny sales. So then I'll load up on those. And those are kind of my workhorse brushes. I'll use and abuse those because I can get them for a couple bucks each. Whereas like my Rosemary brushes can cost up to, $15, $20 each. So I definitely try to make sure I'm taking good care of those. Yeah, I just really am looking for that interlocking bristle brush. They're called chunking, Chunking, I think, or maybe it's Chungking. Chunking interlocking hog hair bristle brush. And I prefer flats personally, but you guys are gonna find the brushes that work best for you. A lot of people like filberts. But I just find that I make my own filberts by just being mean to my brushes, by scrubbing them down. So I don't think I ever buy filberts anymore. And I'm just kind of looking at the shapes of these bushes and making sure that they're, I'm not repeating like little ball shapes here or anything else. I want them to feel organic. If you want this to be like a well-maintained farm with groomed shrubbery and everything, that's fine. Just do it purposely. I personally want kind of a rustic farm. My farmer's too busy plowing fields to care about grooming all of his shrubbery. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and jump back there. So I've got my shadows from that still over here. So I'm gonna look to this because I want it to stay at about the same value with a slight color and temperature shift, but the value stays almost the same. So by mixing them right beside each other there, I'm able to tell if I'm getting close. I want it to go a little greener. There we go. So you can see that it kind of almost blends together, especially if you squint your eyes. When you squint your eyes, if the value is really close, it's not exactly the same, but it's really quite close. So that will hopefully help the lights back here. Become much more subtle. Yeah, I think that's reading pretty well on the monitor. It's kind of fun to have that as a check. I can just look over and see, not so have a little distance from it. And does that make sense, you guys, about the values getting closer, the colors getting closer, the temperatures getting closer as you recede back into space?
Yes.
So really strong contrast up here, very little contrast back here. That's a huge thing, and it's a lot of painters don't utilize that properly. And so if you guys can kind of get ahead of that, it's a great advantage early. I'm also going to soften so I'm just kind of going in between where the darks and the shadows meet, and I'm softening that transition a little bit in between them as well. Fun. So I've still got some pretty ugly shapes going on. I need like a lighter brush so you can see it. Kind of ugly shapes going on over here, but I'll come in and break those up. And some of these shapes are a little too high drama, but I'll come in and break those up here in a little bit too. I've got that, but what I do have is a nice harmony that's reading. I've got a good feel for the space. I'm going to go ahead and come into the sky now, even though that's a jump from going from dark to light. It's not my next darkest shape, but I want to start to kind of feel that out a little bit after I add some bushes that are on the ground here. All right, so I'm going to make sure I have a very clean brush because I don't want any of these really earthy colors in there in my sky. And I'm probably going to paint kind of up to the trees. I probably won't paint right next to it in the beginning here. I'm going to go ahead and start with some of my shadow cloud color. So my darkest sky colors are kind of these purples. Add a touch of paint thinner to that, just a touch. Don't want it too wet, but I'm going to kind of give my clouds their shape. I actually need to wipe this guy away because he's not where I want him. Oops. So I just contaminated my nice purple color up there, picked up some yellow. So I'm gonna have to remix that really quick because that color will not work. So sorry about that. I don't want too vibrant of a purple. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little yellow to it. That's the color across from it on the color wheel. And that'll kind of gray my purple down. Could be a touch darker, I think. Touch more purple than that. I know that I'm painting clouds, but I'm never going to tell myself painting clouds because, you know, my brain will start taking over and say, well, clouds are fluffy and white balls of, you know, cotton. And that's definitely not the clouds that I'm putting in. So I just am looking for shapes, values, colors, shapes, values, colors. Warming that up a touch. Touch more paint thinner. I'm painting close to the trees, but not all the way up to the trees because I just don't want to pick up any of that dark green if I can avoid it. Sorry, my shoulder's getting in the way. It's kind of hard on a couple of these angles. I'm gonna go ahead and warm that horizon up just like we were talking about a little bit earlier. I've got to decide, I've got that mountain in there, but I don't know. I'm gonna cut it down a little bit. It's not, doesn't need to be so tall. So I'm just kind of getting, these are considered to me kind of the darks of my clouds. I'm just about done putting in the darks, and then I'll be able to start bringing in the lights. All right, I'm going to bring in my blue of my sky back on the right side here. Sorry about the shoulder. I'm going to move it over a little bit so I can reach it. Kind of gonna lighten and warm up that blue a little bit as it's coming from here to here, but it's probably too much.
Laurie S. Orwick or Grandma.
Sorry, my mom's calling. And as always, I swear I silenced that phone. It just doesn't listen. All right. Now we get the fun part. Get to come in and add our light into those clouds. That's these fun colors that we pre-mixed up there. Those pinks and peaches. And then I'll kind of move these around and shape them. I like, with clouds, they're great because you can kind of think sculpturally a little bit more. So I'm realizing my pink that I have up here is a little too dark. So I'm just kind of using some of these lights that I have down here to lighten it up. Warming that up, getting down to the yellower peachy color. So by changing up my pressure and the amount of paint that I have on the brush, I'm able to kind of skim along, kind of just adding a little bit of that color and softening those transitions so that it feels more cloud-like. If I make it all angular up here with, you know, big, thick brush strokes, then it loses the softness that are clouds. So it's important to me when painting to think a little bit, you know, I say we paint things, or we don't paint things, we paint values, lights, and colors and shapes. But sometimes you go, okay, how do I make the clouds feel like clouds, the trees feel like trees? If there were rocks, how do I make them feel like rocks? What's their inherent differences? And oftentimes it comes down to their edges. So where things meet. So clouds, even, you know, a really thick, heavy cloud is still probably going to have softer edges than a rock. And it's also, since it's up in the sky and it's a cloud, it's probably going to have lighter values. Even if it feels very dark compared, you know, this compared to this is a big jump in value. But as long as I keep in mind, remember when we thought that the shadows in these trees were very light compared to here, compared to the shadows here? So I'm always thinking about that relationship. How does, you know, one shadow feel against another shadow, feel against another shadow? How does the edges feel? What's the difference? There are no real secrets to clouds. It's just kind of painting them, but it's also just observing both your reference and, you know, I know a lot of painters, especially on YouTube video tutorials, that'll pull out these things that look like makeup brushes, you know, to do their clouds. That could be nice for softening up some edges, but I would really use this very sparingly. I'm still just using my nice firm hog hair bristle brush, and I can come back in and I'll show you, I'll drag some of the paint to soften the edges. And again, it just comes down to pressure. And I will come back in and put these edges around the tree so they don't have these little funny force fields. That will all get fixed up. But again, I'm just trying to keep my edges a little bit clean. And I actually like to come in and drag my tree up into those negative shapes, or those shapes that are left. And you can get some really nice soft edges where the tree and the skies meet, or some interesting shapes. There's lots of ways you can do that. Everybody doing okay? Because they're very nice and quiet.
Lee, could you put yourself on mute, please?
I just lost the view also when that dog barked. Gotta find it.
Okay, up here. I'll talk. So you should be able to pin me, I think would keep it, but I'm not positive. So yeah, hopefully that comes back. I'll try to remember to talk a little more. So I can decide now, do I come through and just keep working on these clouds? I got some nice fun shapes going on. A little bit hard to see in the light. See if I move it. Strong light on this side now. But anyways, I'm kind of liking what I got going on, but maybe I will get down into those fields a little bit. So, you know, that's the great thing about oils. You got time, I can. They'll stay wet so I can go move on to another area. Again, just to make sure that I've got everything in harmony, relating to each other. Just looking for all the little underpainting areas that I haven't gotten to yet. I kind of brown sticking through a little glaring or a little strangely. So I'm just kind of getting those all covered. Here I have what I consider a little bit of a tangent where this cloud's coming on top of this tree and just kind of ending. So I want to do something with that. And I'll just kind of have it come across like that, meet up to this cloud over here. And I'll soften this edge so it doesn't look like it's sitting so obviously just on top of the sitting on top of the trees. Remember, these clouds and these trees don't even know each other exist. They're in totally different, you know, maybe miles apart. So I just want to make sure that it doesn't look like the trees are affecting the clouds or vice versa. This is a part that'll be kind of fun for me to come back and see again and see if I like what I've got going on with the clouds so far. And just softening where the clouds are kind of overlapping the sky. That area got a little dark, so come back in and lighten that a little muddy, I guess would be a better way to say it. This cloud up here, I just want to really soften it. So I'm going to come in. Just want it to kind of fall back into space. when I come back into these trees, I'm actually going to be able to take my brush into my sky, pick up some of those colors, and then put some sky holes in. And the good thing about sky holes is they don't need to be pure color, because not as much light is getting in through sky holes. If you make your sky holes overly bright, in fact, they look weird. Just kind of think the smaller the sky hole, the darker or the less light's usually coming through it. All right, let's see if I can show you that a little better. Better light. There's kind of the sky. And I can continue to finesse it and move it around later. But I think that's an okay spot for now. Now we got great big flat areas of grass. So, well, I guess I can even knock in my hill since I've got some of those colors kind of almost done. And take some of my sky color. Super bright blue. Not what I want. So I'll add some my peach to it to gray it down. So the opposite of blue is orange on the color wheel. In fact, that blue is so strong, I got to get it out of there. You know, and that could work on your painting if you want a really bright blue, but I want gray blue. That little purple stripe on it is a little odd. So what I'm going to do is actually bind them. Yeah, I'm not quite liking this. It's not dark enough compared to there. So I'm going to darken it a little here and see what happens. Maybe I should have stuck with my initial instinct to just take the hill out, which I had done in the reference. We shall see. That mountain may not survive. Cool thing with storms too is I can actually, with big clouds like that.
I'm really glad you did that though, because that was the question I was asking you. It's sometimes really hard to know where to merge the sky and the land.
Yeah, so what I can do here too, with that nice sky, I'm gonna even make it just so it's peeking out there a little bit. Yeah, we'll have to kind of step back on that one, but I've got something in there. Now I'm going to get into the big grass area here. Reference is curling up on me.
Almost looks like ocean.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, so it may have to get darker, cooler, more shadow. So I'll come back to that. We'll see what happens once I get the bright colors of the fields in a little bit. Cleaning my brush here.
Michael, this is Kim. When your brush goes off screen, are you wiping it off before you dip into another color?
Yeah, probably. I've got my towel in my left hand. So yeah, like what color is on there? Yep. Yeah, that's instinctual. I don't think about that too much anymore. I almost feel like cleaning my brush has become like a, I don't want to say a nervous tick, but it's kind of automatic, which is funny because, you know, a lot of times I'm painting with the same color still, but and I know there'll be green over here if I want it to, at least the reference has green in the road, but I'll decide how much I want, or do I want it to pretend that it's just the field color? Definitely did not make enough of this interesting color, so I'm gonna run out as we get down to the bottom here. Scrub, scrub, scrub. kind of over darkened in here a little bit more than I need. So I'm just kind of getting it covered. That bluey gray stripe is fighting me. I added too much shadow, so that's where I wanted it to kind of feel like it's rolling down the hill a little bit towards the road. So have to come back in and tweak that a little bit. I should probably be using, well, and I will be using more controllable brush in a little bit. This one's pretty big and messy, but it's still great for just getting the paint down, and then I'll be able to go in and finesse it and make the littler shapes and get basically the detail, I guess, is what we would kind of think of it as. So we have approximately 20 minutes left in class. Do you guys want me to just keep painting, or does anybody want kind of feedback on some of their where they're at on Facebook? And then we can kind of decide as well, are we thinking we're going to want 2 weeks to work on this, or would we like to, because next week is the last class, so we kind of got to decide, do we start another painting? I would like to still demonstrate kind of the design of negative shapes, and I'll do that next week, move that back, and kind of bring in the finishing, bring in detail and stuff, because right now everything's very big and blocky and, dare I say, messy. So I would like to finesse it, I guess, do the where I bring in a nice smaller brush and start to bring in all that, bring the clouds down and all of that. So what would you guys like for the last 20 minutes? Should I just keep painting?
Keep painting.
Yes, please.
I'd love to watch you keep painting, and I'd love
Okay,
to
great.
see you finish.
I'll keep painting. I'll get the grasses in this field here. Maybe I'll take up some of the trees so they meet the clouds, because I don't want that to dry. So let me go ahead and.
I'd also like to throw in that I'd love to see how you do the finished details. So if you end up working on this one for 2 weeks, that's perfectly acceptable.
I second that.
Okay. So then next week will be me kind of coming in, finishing this and doing a demo on kind of designing negative shapes a little bit. And
Yes.
it's kind of a fun one you guys could work on your own in between classes. And then we'll be starting the color class. Wow, it reads so bright on the monitor. Add a little more of the red, yellow.
Also, Michael, maybe on Facebook this week, you can give us a little bit of feedback on the design of our paintings, if they're vary from yours, and what's working, what's not.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I tried to go through and do some of those the last couple of days, but yeah, I definitely will. Good idea.
As you're painting, I'm seeing that you're defining areas so much more than the reference photo does. I really appreciate it.
Good. Well, yeah, I'm leaving them, and then I will actually go through and obliterate some of these edges so that they don't, again, they don't feel so stark. And that would be the theoretical third class after color would be edges and brushwork. And you can see there's very, very little brushwork yet. I'm just kind of laying in the colors. I like to think of it almost as putting on clay that I can come through and kind of manipulate and mold in a little while. It's important that I get paint on to be able to work with. I'm really working on using more and more and more paint too, and also really focusing, that's kind of my focus for the year, is brushwork. And making my brush strokes count, making them important. And some brush strokes you can do it the first time, and other ones it's, you get some paint on there and then you manipulate it or you add to it. Sorry, my shoulder's sitting right in the way. Got to remember to look over at the monitor every once in a while. I'm doubting I'm going to get these rows right. I'm just kind of guessing. So I'll probably come back in and add the detail either in the darks or in the lights of the rows. But I figure I can kind of hint at them, hopefully. Already kind of lost some of them. But I can also decide how important, how clear do I want them to be. I can also probably get a Q-tip. I'm going to turn this big light down here over here on this side. See if that helps. Don't know if it's doing anything.
Michael?
Yeah.
I have a question. When you're like at this point in a painting, is it okay? Well, it's kind of a weird question. I feel like I want to blend the colors together a little bit, or like, does it depend on what look you're going for? is it better to have a little more delineation between the different colors by the brush strokes, or should it kind of blend in a bit?
It's kind of a stylistic thing, and you're gonna kind of learn that for yourself. So my typical way in the last number of years was a lot more blending while I was painting. But I've kind of learned that if I'm a little bit patient and get things laid in like this, then I'm really able to, it's kind of that whole thing about falling in love too early. Like if I start really finessing an area, sorry, it got a blur, and I just make like the most beautiful tree over here with perfect leaves and stuff and perfect blending, but then realize that the color and the shape is wrong. It's twice as hard to go in and do what needs to be done and fix it. So I found that by building it up in these big shapes, again, just kind of thinking building blocks and what's the next building block? What's the next building block? Helps me to not fall in love with it quite as much and to be able to make changes and to see the changes that might be necessary. But there's nothing, there's a lot of painters out there who would literally paint this tree, then move on. You know what I mean? And finesse and finish off an area. One of my very favorite local painters is named Amy Erickson, and she will just perfect little areas and move across like if she's doing her still lifes. And bless her, but it's not my way of seeing it. My way is kind of building it up, and you'll see I'm bouncing back and forth, like little changes down here all of a sudden make changes up here necessary. And as I move around, at least in the monitor, this blue is, sorry, this blue up here looks outrageous. I don't think I could leave that pure blue. I think I'd have to gray that down just to make it relate. Otherwise, it's so interesting right in the corner of the painting. And maybe it's, in the photo, but I still would just kind of contemplate that. So I just don't want to fall in love with anything too much that may need some fixing or changing, or completely big things may need to be done to it. Got it almost covered. I'm going to bring some greens down into here. Our beautiful greens. Maybe bring some greens into the road. I don't know if I answered your question at all. But there's nothing wrong with, especially while it's wet, you can definitely, make changes that you think need to be made. It'll be a lot easier for me to kind of come in and finesse some of these as they're wet. And then others details I might want to add right on top and let it dry a little bit more. So kind of depends on what you're doing a little bit.
I had a similar question because it's the, after you've blended, you cannot come back and build shape. Is that a real iterative process that one should avoid?
It is tougher, and it's hard to mimic that edge quality once you've softened things, if you do need to come in and add. But I guess I don't worry about it too much. And there are times where I'll come in and just obliterate whole areas early on in the painting, just soften everything up. And I just trying to think of a good way to say it. It was kind of on an individual basis, and it's kind of on a painting by painting basis. But there's definitely times where I come in and I over soften and I over blur too early, and I end up having to rebuild the whole structure again, get my darks strong and crisp in there so I can see what's going on. I'm trying to be more purposeful as I paint and more thoughtful and maybe a little slower. I used to feel like, you know, I was showing off almost like, look how fast I can paint. But that's not, you know, I can paint a lots and lots of bad paintings really quickly, which is not as interesting as painting a couple good ones and learning as I'm painting. I still paint pretty quickly, and I guess I kind of have to make a living off it. I'm liking the pinks next to the greens, they're nice. Maybe I'll even bring some of those greens kind of into here.
I'm interested to see also how you will resolve the foreground grasses in terms of its detail versus the background grasses.
Yeah, and I can decide, you know, obviously detail wants to come forward, but if this is not really my focal area, I can let it kind of not be as in focus. I could definitely let this corner kind of go out of focus. I could, in fact, like soften this little passage right here. And that just basically takes it so it brings your attention in a little bit. So hard, crisp edges and detail will draw our attention. And so we have to be a little bit careful of where do you want the attention to go. Yeah, and I don't know how much, you know, I want to focus in on the grasses and everything else as I'm kind of building it up. I'm hoping it'll kind of tell me a little bit. Maybe it would be nice to have thought about that a little ahead of time, but I am kind of hoping, because again, my focus is back here, right? These silos, everything's kind of leading towards it, as a kind of generally. And so, yeah, that is a good question and one I'm not even sure of quite yet. I'll kind of feel that out as I build it up. Yeah, the silos. So what I'm going to do now in our last little bit here is I'm going to go ahead and bind the trees to the sky. So I don't have that weird little brown halo force field thing going on around there. I'm going to move the camera slightly because otherwise I'm going to be in the way the whole time. So what I'm going to do is basically take my brush and make it mostly clean. And I can pick up some of the paint that's, you know, in the tree, and I'll just have to keep cleaning it as I drag that paint. Every time I pick up the sky, if I don't want it, I have to just clean that brush. Remember, I kind of want a little more of a reddish green as I bring it around here. doesn't take much for the eye to read detail, like to read things as detailed. So I generally will kind of err on the side of less is more when it comes to like detail and leaves. I like when people come up and, you know, say to me, oh man, that painting from a little ways away read so differently. It looked like, you know, so much stuff was going on, and you get up close and you're not really telling me as much as it looked, I thought. I'm gonna even make this area even a little more reddish and warmer because it's got that big blast of warm cloud right behind it. So where those two edges meet, it's definitely gonna feel warmer. And the cool thing is it's letting me even bring some of the colors from down here up so I can create a feeling of harmony. Hopefully not too obvious that I'm doing that. But it's nice to bring colors from other parts of the painting to harmonize the whole image. Sorry, I'm having a hard time talking and painting right now for some reason. So I'm going to merge these edges here. Those have to go back into space so that to get a little lighter. And then I'm going to blend the transitions in the two foreground tree areas. I want these edges to be a little softer back there. So I'm letting them blend a little bit with some of those background colors. I'm letting them meet up and I don't know, kiss, I guess. And it's a very fine area. It's very small. warm these up a little bit here too. Anywhere I've got the bright sky, means it's harder for our eyes to focus. So there's a bigger transition. And I personally, when I look into it, oftentimes will get kind of a, it's called a penumbra, or kind of a outline of another color. So I just like to do that with warmer reds oftentimes. Just creates a nice transition. All right. So now I'll just come through really quickly. Class is over, but I'll just keep painting for a little bit while it's nice and wet and just kind of create some of these transition colors. So it's kind of a back and forth as I'm cutting colors, shapes, blending where they meet, the darks and the lights. Just shifting the temperature a little bit, getting some cooler darks as well. Kind of bounce around in there. So it's not just a big dark shape, solid dark. I think we can get a lot of color into our shadows. I think it's a very underutilized area in a lot of people's paintings. But you just got to make it stay in the shadow family. Can't make it too bright or too different. It's got the colors have to be much more subtle transitionally in the shadow area.
Michael, this is Kim. I got to hop off. I have another appointment, but thank you
Yeah,
very
yeah.
much. Today was great.
Sorry, it always goes long, but yeah, if you want to see it on the video, you can just fast forward all the way through. But it probably won't be much different than what you're seeing now. I'll just kind of merge these, and then I'm probably going to call it good for today. Maybe I'll soften some cloud areas, but thank you, Kim. And thank you to everybody. I understand you don't need to spend your whole day with me, so appreciate it. And I'll just work a little bit more, and then we'll come back to it.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, also, and let us know how your daughter is.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, see you later.
Thank you, Michael. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. I can't see, it's too far
Come.
away talking, but anyways, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you. You too. So if any of you guys have been with me in my classes in the past, you can see that I'm still retaining a lot of the soft edges that I'm kind of known for, but at the same time, I'm trying to be a little more cognizant of where, sharper edges can come into play and be interesting without overwhelming. And also just pretty marks, just a whole lot of different brush strokes. So that everything's not so repetitive. So I'm just kind of, sometimes I'll drag the brush, sometimes I'll turn it, sometimes I'll, all sorts of different marks that these little flat brush can make, and just using it, I feel like I'm helping it fulfill its destiny, all the marks it's capable of.
Thank you, Michael. I have to go also, but I love seeing it come together at the end. It really is interesting to see you finish it. Thank you.
Well, yeah, we'll work on it a little more next week. Maybe I can even throw it in the freezer, but thank you. And I apologize again if I took up any unnecessary time, but yeah, I'll just keep painting a little bit more. And if anybody's left on there, it'll be a surprise to me. Thank you,
But
guys.
it's nice to see someone get closer to a finish, because normally in classes, you just see the start of paintings and you never see the end of a painting.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, and that is kind of how I like to do it, where we kind of build them up together. And in the beginning, I especially needed to teach you guys a little bit about just how do we start a painting. But yeah, as we learn now, we can start to finesse it. And as long as we're really working on the values, I'm not too concerned with the colors at this point. So have fun when you start painting on yours.
Thank you. And I hope your daughter's okay also.
Oh, I appreciate it. I'm sure she'll be fine. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I also have to go, but I just want to say thank you. This was fantastic. Without having to ask any questions, you've answered so many of them with this painting.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you. That's fantastic. And I look forward to seeing what you do this week. And I still need to catch up on your last week's blog. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten to it, but I look forward to reading them as always.
It's completely understandable. Children come first.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you. Take care. It's a great class.
Guys. All right. I think that may be a good spot to call it a day. I got my little towers back there. I could.
I was gonna say, will you finish the silos last?
It'd be nice to kind of put them in, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure I kept fairly crisp edges on.
I was thinking that maybe once you got those put in, then that blue up in the right corner might not be so it might be nice.
It could be, yeah. Oh, that's hard to look at. Yeah. Well, we got something there. We'll probably have to repaint those, but it's coming. I mean, it's got an okay feel to it, right? It kind of moves back into space, and it'll be fun to revisit it next week and tighten things up. So anyways, thank you guys so very much for all your time and patience. And I will look forward to seeing your work on Facebook and seeing you guys next week.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank-
Wow, I can't believe there's 5 of you still.
You what?
Can't believe there's still 5 of you.
Yes, I am painting right along. Now it's going to be hard for me to just stop painting. That's my problem.
Is that Lee or who's talking
Yes,
now?
that's Lee.
All right, Lee, you're awesome. And yeah, well, don't stop. Just keep painting.
What's that?
I said, don't stop. Just keep painting.
Oh yeah,
Just
I will.
put the video on repeat and keep going.
Yeah, yes. I don't know if it's good to paint right along with you, but that's kind of what I've been doing. But
Yeah,
anyway.
so I've taken a lot of workshops, and I've thought I've actually done that where I stand right literally behind the teacher when they're demoing, kind of not in the way of the class, but just try to keep up and paint along. And it's almost impossible because all these decisions are being made so differently. You probably need time to contemplate the colors that you're mixing and to see things. So if you literally just try to keep up in certain times where some of my decisions maybe worked just a touch better or a touch faster, you can just get yourself into a bind. But that's the great thing. I mean, again, I really wasn't excited about teaching on Zoom and didn't teach at all last year. Missed it. But I actually think I might like it better in some ways. There's definitely some benefits to it. And, like the fact that I got Susan in my class from, far away, and other students that were, wouldn't be driving into Portland to paint every Wednesday. This is nice. And then the ability to watch the video again, or the ability to take, I know some of you have had to take your husbands to medical appointments, and being able to do that and just come back and watch a video. It's fantastic. And I can go as long as I want. All right, you guys, take care, and I will post on Facebook as soon as I hear back the news. We'll get we'll hear about my daughter, how she's doing tomorrow. So
yeah,
fantastic,
okay.
Guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much, Susan. It was great having you in class as always. I'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.